The chair recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohen, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to be like Ms. Lee and ask you a lot of questions because there's a lot on my mind.
I'm sorry, sir, I can't.
I say I'm going to ask you a lot of questions because there's a lot on my mind and we have limited time. In July, a young man named Darius Stewart was shot and killed by Memphis police. He was a passenger in a motor vehicle stopped for a traffic citation. Yet he was asked to get out of the car. They looked at him. They put him in the car. A tussle occurred. He was shot and killed. The DA asked the grand jury to indict voluntary manslaughter. The grand jury chose not to. How that was presented, who knows? Obviously not as well as a ham sandwich could have been presented. I've asked the Department of Justice to look into it. Your first response is you'd monitor the case. Now that the case has gone through the grand jury process and not gotten the result that the DA wanted, I would like to ask, as I've asked in writing before, for the Department of Justice to look into this case and see if civil rights violations may have occurred.
I would like to have my staff reach out to you and get that information, sir.
Are you familiar with the case?
I'm not currently familiar with the case, although we have a number of similar matters under review.
Well, I hope you will become familiar because it's a situation that many people in the city of Memphis, including myself, feel was a miscarriage of justice, equal to any of those others in the United States. And for some reason, it hasn't risen to the radar of the United States Attorney General, and I hope it will. The DEA took a 2015 National Drug Assessment Summary, and at that particular summary or study, most agents said marijuana was like at 5% total risk to the society, and meth and heroin were the most serious drugs challenging them and the American people. Do you agree that we should spend more time, our law enforcement, working against meth, heroin, and opiates, and not marijuana?
Congressman, I think that with respect to our narcotics laws, what we try and do throughout the entire Department of Justice and at the DEA is focus on the specific problem in a specific region and devote resources to that. We currently have a crisis regarding heroin use and opioid abuse in the country, and some communities have been consumed by that particular problem. There are, unfortunately, some communities that still have problems with methamphetamine, so there might be a different focus on the type of drug,
but marijuana is
depending
not
upon
a place
the issue.
Marijuana is not where cities have people needing marijuana and knocking off 7-Elevens to get some money to buy their marijuana. They're doing that for meth and heroin. Is that not right?
Certainly, we've seen violence associated with meth, with heroin, with prescription drugs as well. The type of violence associated with the marijuana trade typically occurs at the dealer level, at the import level, and I certainly have seen cases where there's been significant violence at that level.
There is, and the reason there's that violence is because just like prohibition, we made it illegal. It's not because of the marijuana and the need to have it on the street level basis where people need to commit violence to get money to buy a drug. It's because we did the same mistake with marijuana that we did in the 20s with alcohol. The public demanded it. The racketeers, the criminals got involved. We made them rich, and they used guns to protect their properties. That was a mistake. Do you agree marijuana should not be Schedule I in the same category as LSD and heroin?
Well, with respect to the issue of scheduling, that is typically determined based on whether or not there is another use for the product. And I think that there would have to be studies by the FDA, among others, to determine whether or not a scheduling change in any drug is necessary.
But don't you agree that you have to change the scheduling from one to get the studies? I mean, there are lots of young people, like one of my constituents, Chloe Grauer, who died waiting for the opportunity to get Charlotte's Web. Lots of people who'd like to get cannabinoids. You could talk to Montel Williams and what it does for multiple sclerosis, or any number of cancer patients who it helps with nausea or allows them to eat and have an appetite. Don't you agree, unlike Chuck Rosenberg, that medical marijuana is something serious and should be looked at as an aid to people in our society to get through difficult problems and not considered a joke?
Well, certainly the issue of medical marijuana is significantly different from the criminal enforcement or use of marijuana. And certainly the Department supports the FDA studies in the use of cannabinoids, or the substance within marijuana, that have been shown to have some efficacy.
We're about to run out of time. I hate to cut you off. I would hope you would look into initiating, which you can, taking it off of Schedule I. It's crazy to have it with LSD and heroin, and should not be there, and it should be studied. RFRA has been used to allow groups to discriminate against LGBT people. and it's been based on a 2007 DOJ Office of Legal Counsel opinion that said RFRA could be used to grant exemptions to federal discrimination laws governing federal programs. Will you commit today to instruct the Office of Legal Counsel to review and reconsider the 2007 OLC legal opinion that's being used today to justify taxpayer-funded discrimination counter to the President's executive order?
I would like to look into that issue. If I could have my staff reach out to you and get more information on that, I would appreciate that.
On that same issue, holdovers from the Bush team, there was a holdover from Bush in the commutation office for 6 years. That's why the President got hardly any recommendations for commutations. Can I have a commitment from you to give more resources to people to study prison records and to facilitate the sending expeditiously recommendations to the President for commutations of the thousands of people whose sentences should be commuted, who are serving time for long-term drug offenses, nonviolent drug offenses that aren't serving the American people by having them be in federal prison?
Congressman, over the last 18 months, the Department has, in fact, taken a significant look at the staffing and resource needs of the Office of the Pardon Attorney and sought to provide additional resources so that every application that comes through, whether it be for a pardon or clemency, can be considered quickly and efficiently.
But it hasn't done that. And let me remind you what Dr. King said. Justice delayed is justice denied. Every single one of those people serving a day in prison who will eventually get a recommendation is having their justice delayed and denied.
And on that note, the gentleman's time has expired, and we will recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General Lynch, on February 2nd, 2014, Kate Duvall, Chief Counsel to IRS Commissioner John Koskinen, learned that Ms. Lois Lerner's hard drive